Please welcome Jessica Litt.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be here today.
This month, we're looking at service to the world because the whole theme for the year was to help create a better world. What can I do to help create a better world? I can't do the whole thing, but what can I do? There's always something that we can do. And it made me think to myself that what I can do is to continually remind us and remind myself about some ancient truths that just keep being repeated over and over and over again. I was told this by someone. I think he had been in counterintelligence, or maybe, but that sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Anyway, but he had been working in intelligence, and And he said, when we look out at the world and something happens, it's no big deal. It's something because things happen. Twice, it might even be a coincidence. 3 times, 4 times, same thing happening. It's a pattern. So if I look out over world history, and especially studying what I like to study, because some people, we could study the history of anything, but I like to study the history of religion. And I see certain messages showing up through the millennia and in different continents with their own little customized take on things, but certain messages keep happening over and over again. I'd say there's a pattern. I'd say that some universal intelligence wants to communicate to that which is intelligent, which is us. There are certain things that are good for us, and they show up as traditions or practices. And there are 5 spiritual traditions or practices that show up in all major world religions. Now, some are emphasized more than others, but they're all there. So you can't go to or be in a religion without these things showing up. So this is a test, a little contest. I would love it if someone would tell me one spiritual practice. Prayer. I love it. Well, prayer shows up. Good. So prayer. We teach prayer. And to me, that just means, if I'm going to, bring it down so that you could talk to anyone about it, it's communicating with something greater than yourself. It's communicating with the divine, or whatever you want to call it. It's communication. It's about opening up your heart and knowing that something is listening or paying attention or can respond. So that is prayer. Now, we could call it, some people call it, fancy name like spiritual mind treatment or scientific prayer. But it's still prayer. It's communication. And it works kind of like this. The kind of prayer that we teach, because there's all sorts of communication. There's is a communication. Please, please, please. How many of you have been there? And how many of you have done this? I know I'm in a spot. But if you just get me out of this, I promise. How many of you have done that? In the past. Certainly not recently. Those are all communications. But we suggest a communication that's a little bit healthier. And so what we do is we talk to ourselves about that which we are talking about, so that we shift ourselves to be open to that which the universe is always doing, which is giving and blessing and caring for. The universe, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it, cares for its creation. You can see that. There's a caring. The nature seems to move and adjust itself to care for itself. And we're part of that nature. So when we pray, we are communicating with that which is infinite intelligence, the love intelligence of the universe, and saying, I will adjust myself so that I can receive that which is mine, because I'm part of this universe. I am going to receive its blessings and its wholeness and its healthiness. So it's more of it's a conversation, but it's not beseeching. It's like, this is what's going to happen. And so, to make it very, very simple, there was a song by Margaret Owen that went like this. God is, I am, I know, I am grateful, I release and let it go. So what do we know? So we're asked to know something. God is. What am I going to know about God? We will always reflect what we say about God, so let's say something big about God. We are our understanding of God. So those people who believe that God is vengeful and petty show up as being vengeful and petty. Those people who believe that God's making a list are kind of fearful and checking it twice. How many of you grew up like that? There's just this tendency to want to duck when you believe in that kind of God. You don't want to show up big, because maybe you'll be invisible if you believe in that kind of God. So we say to ourselves that God is good and magnificent, and it is the fulfillment of what I need right now. If it's a health issue, God is health. God is the perfect functioning of the universe, and it is the perfect functioning of my body. Because if God is, then I am. I'm a part of that. So we talk about how we are in relationship with that which is so big and magnificent out there, then it's got to be showing up in me. And I know that it's now functioning through me, as me, lovingly in this moment. See, I'm changing my mind about the universe so that the universe can function fully through me. And then we move into, I am grateful. Because when you've had this kind of shift and you realize that you're not alone, there's a sense of gratitude. And the gratitude is in direct proportion to the willingness to let something bigger than ourselves function through us. And then I release and let it go. Hardest part, letting it go. So there's prayer. In the Bible it says, now this is like drawing a line in the sand, because how many of you have prayed? Good. Now here's the line. The Bible says, pray without ceasing. Oh, gives you something to work at. And I've noticed that since I first attended my first church like this, that I pray more and more and more. And it's not uncommon for me to have a conversation when things go well. Oh, I'm so grateful, I'm so grateful, I'm so grateful. I realize that good is showing up out there because I've done good work inside. And I'm like grateful, grateful, grateful. In a way, it's praying without ceasing. And something bothers me and I'm like, forgive me, please. And I'm saying to myself, forgive me. How many of you make mistakes hourly? Just things I don't want to do. Even if I don't do them, I don't want to think them. And so I'm like forgiving myself. Forgive myself, forgive myself, forgive myself. Like, get over it. It's one thing to make a mistake. It's another thing to carry it around for days. And that's praying without ceasing. What's another spiritual practice? Well, we're going to get to, meditating. Let's go with meditating first. Reverend Michael Ingersoll, first service, said, prayer and meditation. I said, let's separate the two. Because if prayer is how you talk, meditation is how you listen. Meditation is about stilling the mind and controlling the mind. Because if you don't control the mind will go off in its own direction. It's much like being in a car and you're supposed to be the driver, but you end up being the passenger in the back seat, yelling and screaming while the driver goes anywhere it wants. How many of you have had this experience going down Peaceful Lane? And then all of a sudden something happens and something takes control of the wheel and off you go and you're on an off-road experience down a bumpy road and then you're careening down a steep cliff and you're seeing yourself almost go over. Anybody there? That's your mind in control. Now, they're teaching meditation, but in a lot of business settings now, but they don't call it meditation because that sounds too religious. They call it mindfulness. I think they should call it mindlessness or less mind, because we're not our mind. And you can't know you're not your mind until you notice that you have a mind. And if you've noticed you had a mind, that which notices is that which should be in control. Instead of the mind going, here we go, this will be fun, you'll love it. You'll feel so alive. So let's do a very simple process of seeing how in control you are of your mind. Because really, That is the practice for meditation. No matter what the meditations are, whether it's a moving meditation, whether you're chanting, whether you're contemplating spiritual words, whatever it is for the purpose of realizing that you can tame this mind, because you are not your mind. So I'll give you a little sample of that. Take a deep breath. It's going to last for 1 minute. All you need are your fingers, because I want you to count. Now, you're going to count something, and every time you do something, you're just going to move your fingers, so you're counting. You can do that, right? All right. And the thing you're going to count is every time your mind goes off in a direction other than where you want it to be. And what I'd like you to put your attention on is a spiritual tool used for meditation in so many different traditions, and that's your breath. So you're going to put your attention on your breath. Take a deep breath. Now you found your breath. And I say you found your breath because you've been breathing all morning, and now you finally are paying attention to it, right? Take a deep breath. Now keep your attention on your breath. That's all you have to do. You might pay attention to how your lungs expand. You might pay attention to how the breath goes in the nostrils. You might feel it going down into your body. It doesn't matter. But for 1 minute, keep your attention on your breath. And every time your mind wanders, don't make yourself wrong. Just give yourself a click. Okay? Ready, set, 1 minute, go. Okay, bring your attention back to the room. How many of you moved your fingers a few times? How many of you moved both hands? How many of you went into the second round? What I've learned and I've learned this by teaching this class, self-mastery, that is if you spend a minute or 5 minutes just keeping track of your thoughts, pretty soon your thoughts know that you're keeping track of them, and they give up. And pretty soon you're just still. And in that stillness, you find a reservoir of peace and yet power that's hard to describe. Because you have started driving the car instead of the car driving you. What's another spiritual practice? Study. Study is taking in what feeds the soul. So many spiritual traditions have their books that people will study. So if you are Jewish, you might study the Torah or the Kabbalah. And if you were Hindu, you might study the Bhagavad Gita or the Ramayana. And studying it not to read to see what it says, but studying it to see what it does to you, how it changes you. It's not studying so that you can repeat it to someone else. It's studying so that the words, and if it's a holy book, there will be a transmission, so that the transmission reaches into your soul and feeds the soul, because the soul doesn't get fed much. One of the reasons why we teach so many classes is that we've learned so much, but we haven't really learned how to forgive, how to rise above, how to not be influenced, how to not be triggered. And that's what spiritual study does. It's about soul mastery over earthly conditions. How many of you have taken Beyond Limits? Now I want you to tell the truth. How many of you had a hard time with Ernest Holmes at first? How many of you thought he was stupid? Only one honest person in the room. Did you know that truth heals so much, girlfriend? How many of you really just thought Ernest Holmes, like, what? Just two of you? I did. I was reading it and go, what? And yet I kept reading, and I noticed that I was shifting because there was a transmission in it. It's not read you don't read it necessarily to have some sort of intellectual understanding, because the soul is not intellectual. It's working at a different level. And so things can shift in you and happen to you that you can't really make sense of. It's the purpose of spiritual study. Okay, what's another spiritual practice? Service. Okay, and what else? Giving. Giving. I'm going to go with giving before we go to service, okay? Now, I love it. Someone said tithing. That's a Judeo-Christian technique for getting in the ballpark. Some traditions, you give in different ways, but the giving is the support of that which supports you spiritually. The support of that which supports you spiritually. So, in some traditions, they gave the first of their crops, the good stuff, not the limp and lamb, which was only a metaphor for I care about God so much that I will give the best, as opposed to that which is left over. I'll give him, the scraps. I'll give God the scraps. So tithing works for me. I'm just going to say tithing works for me. I tithe. I started tithing when I'll say it out loud. I got into this movement almost 40 years ago. I did the math, and I'm like, that means I'm old. How many of you are of a certain age, but you still feel 35? It's like, what happened? I'm 35. What? Why does my driver's license say this number? Anyway, I'm also 120 in my mind. Not 120 years old. Never mind, I was talking driver's license. Thank you. Now you get it. Fine. Anyway, so what I'm getting at is that I somehow started giving to the place that supported me, the inner me. And then I started giving more. And at the time, I was making very little. And the more I gave, the more I was supported. That's the purpose of giving, so that you get this circular motion going on, because the universe gives. If you look out at nature, whatever is in nature, it does as more than what is needed. And that's what keeps everything in balance. And so a lot of traditions would have you give a significant amount, and 10% is a significant amount. It kind of gets your attention. It gets your attention. For me, it's just easy. Decimal point. How much am I supposed to give this today? Decimal point. It's easy. In Buddhist tradition, and there is in one of the Buddhist traditions, the monks will leave the monastery in the morning, and they'll go out with what we call a begging bowl, which shouldn't be called a begging bowl, because they're not begging. They're allowing their community to support them. They don't consider it begging. They consider it like, I'm going to give you this chance. And people will go outside in the streets and give to the monks before they eat themselves. And the monks go back to the monastery after their bowls are totally heaping full of good food to eat. And then they go back to the monastery. I mean, they could grow their own. They could have, sell a statue. They don't, because they know that that circular motion is not only good for them, it's good for the community that they're served. And the people are so willing to give because they know the monks are supporting the community with consciousness. It's just one of the practices. And the other one is service. Did you say service, Donna? Service. I want to get into that a little bit, because the epiphany I had this morning was that when I see God, I'm seeing good, and when I see good, I'm seeing God. And the more I know God, the more good I'm going to see. And I also got that when I love, if I'm truly feeling that sense of love, how many of you have felt that sense of love? It will be diminished if I don't act on it. Service is love in action. Service is love showing up. And it feeds love. And it feels good. It's in other terminology, it might be called a helper's high. People feel good doing good. The other part of that is that if you don't feel good and you do start to move into service, you'll open up love so that the love comes out and then it begins to flow. So service and love is a circular motion that feeds on itself. And when I mean service, I mean doing something for someone without obligation. It's doing good things to make the world a better place. And I want to commend everybody that works with the Create a Better World Committee. I want to commend everybody that helps us with the holiday projects and the food that we collect during the winter. I want to acknowledge everyone for that. And then I looked at the congregation, and I'm looking at them and saying, but there's still people that aren't in service, at least not here. I hope you're out in the world of service, because service is healthy. It's just a healthy thing. But then I looked, because I like to look, like, why wouldn't I be in service? So I'm just going to throw some things out. Why wouldn't I want to make the world a better place? Why wouldn't I want to support that which supports me? And why wouldn't I maybe want that experience of euphoric love that comes from being of service, and a powerful love that comes from being of service? Why wouldn't I do that? And what came to me is that I believe that we don't do what's good for our soul because the spiritual traditions and practices were taught so that we could develop our soul, our everlasting life. Not like to go to heaven, but to know heaven no matter what you're going through. To be heaven showing up. So why wouldn't we do that? And so I came up with these ideas. Just see if any of them might strike you. The first one is, I have no idea how to help. I have no idea how to be of service. But if you're called, if something tweaks you, if something interests you, then you can be of service in that way. When we had the Oso mudslide, I was devastated, I guess because it's not far from my house, at least not relatively. It was pretty close. And I'm thinking, my goodness, what a disaster right in my backyard. How can I be of help? I wanted to be of help. But I also thought, really, do I look like I could shovel a lot of mud? Be honest. Would I want to shovel a lot of mud? I couldn't see myself being of physical help. Some people were making sandwiches. You wouldn't want mine? That wouldn't be loving. But at the time, I was creating some mixed media works, and so I created them, made copies of them, made posters of them, and sold them. And all the money went to the Red Cross that was taking care of people. So I gave the Red Cross $900 because people liked my posters, and it's something that I could do. That's being of service. There's always a way to be of service. If something tugs at you, there's a way to become involved. The next thing I think that I know that I've thought, and I think some people think, is it's just not any fun. That just would not be fun. I was talking to someone last week who was working with, and still continues to work with, a nonprofit that she really believes in. And so she went to the nonprofit and she said, "What can I do?" And they put her in this position. It was like, this is what we need. And she started doing it, and she said, "I hate it. It's just not for me. It's depressing. I hate it. But I still want to support them, but I don't want to do this." And then she's still talking. She said, "You know what I'd really like to do? You know what I could do? I could go to Target or Walmart or some of those other places and get donations. I'd love to do that." They would love to have her do that. Someone that would go around and ask for donations? That's golden. She could do that, be happy, and they're served. There's always a way to do what you want to do and make a contribution and be of service and still have it be joyful. Now, the last thing I was thinking of is that I think some people believe they don't have time. How many of you would like to help, but you just don't have time? Only 10 of you, and you're all on this side. Oh, look, I love this. This is I'm out of time part-time? Do you know that nobody's recording this and we're not going to get you later? And then if you raise your hand, God is not keeping a list. How many of you just don't think you have time? Thank you. This is not for me, this is for you. I think sometimes we just don't tell ourselves the truth. So there's this thing that can happen that says, "I don't have time." And what I want to say is that all lack ideas are a lie, because the universe doesn't lack anything. And time is a creation of mind. Einstein says there's no such thing as time. We make it up. And when you get that, you can make it up any way you want to make it up. I learned a lot from Don Beatty. Who knows Don Beatty? He's gone through training twice. And so the first time he went through practitioner training, I was his teacher, and I remember him saying, and it influenced me forever, "My prayer is to make twice as much money in half the time." Because he kept making more money, but it was taking too much time. And so he shifted the way he thought, and things shifted. Talk to him now. It's worked, and it's worked for me. And I'll tell you, it's taken years for me to make peace with time. And I couldn't talk about it unless I had done it. It took years of my intention and my prayer request with my prayer partner for me to say every year, I want time to be friendly, because time had been so restricted and restrictive. And now I realize I've got time. If I decide to do something, time seems to expand. And I have no more conflict with time. So if you have a thing about time, whether it's in service or spending time with your family or getting an education or all the things that we do with time, it actually is flexible. There is no lack. Deeper issue, I believe, and I didn't say this first service, but I'm going to say it now. The deeper issue, I believe, with time is that we have put an emphasis on busyness. And like our worth is based on how busy we are. So busy takes up time as opposed to accomplishment. You're worth everything to the universe, whether you ever do anything ever again. Your worth is not based on your to-do list. So when you know that, you'll only do that which is important to you. To thrive means that you are the master of your life and in balance, and you do things in graceful ways. That you find time for your spiritual development, and then you start letting your soul lead you. your soul lead you. There's a prayer that Aaron McGowan put to music, and it's "Rise up, O my soul." Rise up. See, so many of us are being influenced by the ego that wants to keep us safe and secure and small. And the soul says, "Wah! Oh, there's a life out there." Let's get to it. Spiritual practices are for the development of the soul. And thank you for caring enough about your soul to be here today and find out how you can develop it. Let's pray. And so this prayer, like all the things that I say them as an invitation for agreement. If what I say appeals to you and speaks to your heart, I invite you to move into agreement. By simply in your heart of hearts, in that secret, wonderful, holy place within yourself, say yes. That's all you have to do. And you can only say yes if you can say no, so you can listen to this and not be in any kind of agreement. There's no right way to do this. But if you say yes, my prayer becomes your prayer. And we move into the sacred, holy institution of the prayer of agreement, which is very, very powerful. So listen and agree if you choose. There is one life, and that life is God's life, and that life is lived throughout this planet, this earth, and all of creation. And that life is in harmony and balance, reorganizing itself for greater health and sustainability at all times. And the only thing that interrupts it is human thought and human action. And so I speak this word, that within myself, the harmony of the universe is now functioning and operating. I am in harmony with nature. And I allow my soul to be fed this day and to become rich in wisdom, love, compassion, and power. And as I know that for myself, I know that for every person in this room, that this day we are being spiritually fed, not just so much by the music or the words, but by the very consciousness that inhabits this room. The collective prayers and faith of people praying over and over and over again for a decade. And we are fed by it. And I do give thanks that for each and every one of us, we are allowing ourselves to move into deeper and richer and more powerful spiritual practices. Richer prayer, deeper meditation, more serious study, joyful service, and incredible, delightful giving. And if you are in agreement with this, simply in your heart of hearts say yes. And let it be. And something within us then is so grateful because we're opening to something greater than ourselves. And so with great gratitude, I just let this prayer go. And together we say, and so it is.